Hello, students. This is part 2 of your assignment for this week. You started out, you read the first 4 chapters of William Zinsser's on writing well, and now you're going to read chapters 5 through 7, pages 24 through 45. And I want you to write a personal narrative. This also will be 300 words or under. And in my first announcement to the course, I asked you to respond with your name and one interesting thing about you. And many or most of you did respond, and there were many interesting things. So now I want you to take that a little bit further, and you're going to write a personal narrative. In 300 words or less, I want you to describe the interesting thing about you. And I want you to do this in a way where you are not telling the reader, me, but also your course mates, what it is that you find interesting about this thing. Instead, I want you to describe the thing and let us come to the conclusion as to whether it's interesting or not. So if it's an activity, if it's baking, paint us a scene. Show us what it is that you do and what you produce, and bring us into the sensory world of your activities, the smells, the tastes, the sounds. Do you listen to music? Do you have a specific ritual? Do you clean the counters first? Do you do this at night or early in the morning? Bring us into your thing with lots of vivid details. All right, I'm going to go over some of, going to go over some of dogs, that's me. I'm going to go over some of these chapters with you. So just one moment. Thanks for your patience. And in chapter 5, the audience, Zinsser makes some interesting points, and he even comments on how they may seem paradoxical, because he just spent time explaining to us how important the reader is and how we shouldn't take the reader for granted. And now he says, soon after you confront the matter of preserving your identity, another question will occur to you. Who am I writing for? And that is, who am I writing for? It's a fundamental question, and it has a fundamental answer. You are writing for yourself. And he goes on to discuss how this might seem paradoxical, but there's 2 different issues he's dealing with. On the one hand, he wants you to care about the form and the words and the sentence structure and the elements of the craft of your writing so that you don't lose your reader. But when it comes to what you're writing about, you're expressing your personality, and you should just try to do that as honestly as you can and not worry about whether an imagined audience is going to like who you are or not. So again, he is urging you to be yourself and to use the best craft in the writing you do to express that personality vividly. He goes on to say, you are writing primarily to please yourself, and if you go about it with enjoyment, you will also entertain the readers who are worth writing for. I love this idea that not all readers are worth writing for. And this is what he calls an attitude of a writer. On page 25, he says, I'm talking about two different issues, which I just mentioned. One is the craft, the other is attitude. The first is a question of mastering a precise skill. The second is a question of how you use that skill to express your personality. All right, so I want you to start thinking about these two different processes. One, paying attention to the craft of writing so that you can be skillful in your expressions, but then also being true to yourself in your expressions of your personality. So in our personal narrative, it's a perfect opportunity for you to practice that. On page 26, Zinsser has some more advice when he writes, never say anything in writing that you wouldn't comfortably say in conversation. If you're not a person who says indeed or moreover, or who calls someone an individual, he's a fine individual, please don't write it. And the point he's making here, which I think is super valid, is that you should read and learn to increase your intelligence and then write accordingly. Don't write in a way that you think is more intelligent than you actually are or sounds more intelligent. Again, it's just be yourself, and we're all in this process of growth. And the more we read, the more we are able to express more complicated ideas and use words in a way that is authentic to who we are. But don't just add words in there because you think it's going to make it sound smart. Okay, and then he gives you some examples, which you should read through. They're really good examples of interesting writing that's authentic and expresses personality. And then let's move on to chapter 6, which is entitled Words. The quote I wanted to focus on in this chapter is, there's two of them. One on page 33, and it states, you'll never make your mark as a writer unless you develop a respect for words and a curiosity about their shades of meaning that is almost obsessive. So words are the tools of the trade, and you really can't care too much about words. So in this course, I want you to start thinking about words, mulling over words, looking up words, using a thesaurus, counting your own words, seeing how many times you repeat certain words, looking for alternative words, becoming obsessive about your words. And also when you read, when you come across words you don't know what they mean, take the time to look them up. Add them to your vocabulary. The second quote states, writing is learned by imitation. If anyone asked me how I learned to write, I'd say I learned by reading the men and women who were doing the kind of writing I wanted to do and trying to figure out how they did it. So we're going to be reading some very good examples of quality academic prose this course, this semester, and I'm hoping you'll take the opportunity to study their craft and to take to heart this idea that we learn to write by reading. You have to practice writing, of course, but really it's by learning from those who came before us and did it in a way that we admire. On page, that's that one. Okay, let's see. We're going to move on to chapter 7. Usage. Now, usage is a word that often is used in connection with grammar. Grammar are the formal rules of language. There are lots of rules, and this isn't a course on grammar, but if you are interested, I will begin to share some grammatical ideas exercises with you. I think that I love thinking about grammar, talking about grammar, writing about grammar, because it puts you in the frame of mind to consider your language and to think about how to build good sentences. But usage is different. Usage is the way language actually works. And when we write academic papers, we want to have grammatically correct sentences. If not, they're going to distract the reader, and the reader will wonder why you've made these choices that are grammatically incorrect. However, usage is a whole range of possible choices you can make within the language that are dependent upon style. And so language is a fabric that changes from one week to another, adding new strands and dropping old ones, and even word freaks fight over what is allowable, often reaching their decision on a wholly subjective basis, such as taste. Notables is sleazy, and it's on page 35. So there's this idea that there are some people who are interested in language and grammar and usage are purists, and they think that there's an etiquette to writing, an etiquette to language that shouldn't change over time. But Zinsser is expressing a different point of view, which is that language is constantly changing, and it's subjective, it's personal. But the second quote I wanted to look at states, "All of this confirms what lexicographers have always known, that the laws of usage are relative, bending with the taste of the lawmaker." And I think that this is a wonderful invitation to think about the language that's used around you today and consider how to incorporate that into your writing and your thinking. And if you do so in a thoughtful way, where you're not just using words reflexively, but you're actually choosing words because they have a specific meaning that you want to convey, then your usage, there's a lot of flexibility in what you do with your language. Okay, so you have an assignment, a 300 word or less personal narrative about the thing you found interesting about yourself. I want you to turn that in a Google Doc or a PDF, a document. And then I want you also, I'm going to add a discussion board. I want you to paste that into the discussion board to let your classmates read your writing. And I want you to respond to two people's entries, giving them feedback on what you found to be interesting about their interesting thing. All right. Enjoy.